Do you want 150 watts in a small package? Well, these monoblock amps might be just for you. Today we're going to be discussing the Orchard Audio Starkrimson monoblock amplifiers. I'm Barrett and this is Spec Tech. Welcome to the channel. For the past couple of months I've had the Orchard Audio Pecan Pie DAC as well as the Starkrimson monoblock amplifiers in for review. These amplifiers were formerly known as BOSC or BOSC on the website, so just so you know, they are one and the same. They are now just called Starkrimson. I did already drop the review video of the Pecan Pie DAC, so if you are interested in how magical this little box sounds, I'll link the video in the top right hand corner of this one. Feel free to check it out after watching this video. So after some long listening sessions with these monoblock amplifiers, I did decide that I really do like them, but at the same time these aren't going to be for everybody. So let's discuss that as well as the price, the specs, the build quality, the sound quality and performance, and then at the end I'll give you my final thoughts and who I think these amplifiers are best suited for. And as usual guys, I don't want to waste any of your time, so let's get right into this review, starting with the price. Before we talk numbers, let me just point out that the price listed on the website is for 2 of these monoblock amplifiers, so you will be getting 2 channels for that price. So the current listed price for a pair of these monoblock amplifiers is $1,499 US. I will link the website down below so you can check for current pricing. I will say that this is kind of middle of the road pricing for amplifiers like these. There are of course those that are less expensive and there are some that are more expensive. But let's talk about what you get for the $1,500 price tag in the specs. But before we do, if you guys are into audio and home theater, please consider subscribing. And if you do subscribe, you might as well tick the bell icon so you can be notified about my future videos. And if you like content like this, guys, take a second right now and please click that like button. Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the specs. And let's start with something that I think is actually great about these amplifiers, and that is the size or the dimensions. They're small enough that you can hide them if you wish, or you can stack them pretty much anywhere. Each one of the amplifiers is 5.5 inches deep, 4.8 inches wide, and 1.9 inches tall. And that is without the binding posts. But to keep the amps that small, the power supplies were moved to the power brick, which makes the power brick fairly substantial. It comes in at 8 inches long, 3.7 inches wide, and 1.72 inches tall, and that is of course without the cables. But the power supply will be easier to hide as it will not need to be on your rack, so I feel like this is a fair trade-off to keep the amp itself smaller. In that small stature, Orchard Audio was able to pack some impressive sound and punch. Each unit is rated for 150 watts RMS and 300 watts peak and has a gain of 16.8 decibels. We will cover a little bit more of what that means for the listener in the sound quality and performance section. One aspect that is somewhat unique to the Starkrimson is that it uses gallium nitride transistors for its amplification, which offers several benefits over traditional silicone transistors like increased slew rate, reduced ringing, faster switching, faster overload recovery, decreased noise, less distortion, better transient response, and higher bandwidth. So what does that mean for the listener? Well, you get fantastic transients with very low distortion and better power handling. These transistors are used in conjunction with a Class D topology, but I want to clear one thing up with this specific Class D amplifier. There seems to be some misconception that Class D automatically means a digital amplifier, and that is not the case with the Starkrimson. It is 100% analog. The pulse width modulation, or PWM, of these amplifiers is performed completely in analog, and it is then amplified by the gallium nitride power stages. This actually makes the Starkrimson more unique in its approach because most of the competition use digital modulation techniques by using FPGAs, DSPs, and processors. These little amps offer some very low distortion numbers and a very low noise floor. Again, we will cover this more in detail during the sound quality and performance section. Before we move on to the sonic goodness of these units, let's talk about the build quality and design. There actually isn't a whole lot to talk about here, and that is by design. But there are some important aspects that I do want to talk about. The external aspect of these amplifiers is very minimalistic. It is basically just a sturdy metal box with very few complexities, at least on the outside. When I questioned Leo, the founder of Orchard Audio, about this, he gave me a quote and said that he follows this philosophy with all of his designs, and the quote is from Da Vinci, and it is that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. That really does sum it up quite nicely. Most of his designs are simple and minimalistic, which in my opinion is a good thing for the most part. Similar to my review with the Orchard Audio DAC, I would like to see a couple of things added to the design here, one of them being a power switch and the other being a power indicator or status light. Although there is a status light or power light on the power brick, chances are you are going to have that tucked away and you're not going to see it. So I feel like adding power switch and power light to the actual unit itself is a must add for future designs. So now that we've covered my suggestions, keep them in mind when we discuss this next part, which is how to power the unit on and off. If you do decide to purchase this unit, please do make sure to follow the instructions on how to power it on and off, or you could cause damage to the amplifier. Don't ask me how I know this. You want to follow these steps exactly. Only power the amp on with the speaker connections already connected to the amps. Do not plug in a live power supply to the amplifier. Trust me on this one, this may or may not have been the mistake I made before finding the instructions under the packaging in the box. To power on the amp, connect the following connections to the amp itself. Connect the speaker cables, then connect the XLR or RCA cables, then plug in the power supply, but make sure that the power supply is off, meaning that the green light on the brick itself is off. And finally, plug the power supply into the AC outlet. To power it off, all you have to do is unplug the power supply from the AC outlet, wait about 3 minutes, and then unplug the rest of the connections. Now, I'm definitely no engineer and don't know everything, but I do feel that a power switch would pretty much eliminate all of the complications with that power on and power off process. That being said, for the most part, people purchasing these amps are going to plug them in and leave them where they decide to place them. It's kind of a set it and forget it type situation. So with my suggestions aside, let's talk about where these amplifiers really do shine, and that's how they sound and how they perform. We do need to discuss one disclaimer before we get into the meat of this subject, and that is that every room is different, placement is different, and that is going to affect how speakers sound. So everything is going to be different in your room versus my room. That being said, I did want to use these amplifiers in different situations, as well as with different speakers, so I could get a really good feel for what they're all about. First, I hooked up the amps to my front, left, and right speakers with an RCA cable from my Denon AVRX 4400 AVR, and then I switched to connecting the Denon to my Tonewinner AD5180 5-channel amplifier. Orchard Audio was actually nice enough to include 2 XLR to RCA adapters with each purchase, so to use in situations like this where you do not have XLR outputs. For the first listening session, I used my Klipsch RF62 version 2 towers with about a 30-degree toe-in and played music only using Spotify. Something to note here is that these two amps are different in their design philosophy and do target a different consumer, at least in my opinion. The Tonewinner AD5180 is a 5-channel amplifier that is more geared towards the home theater enthusiast, and the Starkrimson amps, at least in my opinion, are targeting more of the 2-channel enthusiast. That isn't to say that the Starkrimson Orchard Audio amps can't be used in a home theater setting, but I don't believe that this is their targeted consumer. I also want to bring to your attention that there is a difference in gain here, so keep this in mind. The Orchard Audio amps have a 16.8 dB gain, and the Tonewinner has a 28 dB gain. This was instantly noticeable when switching from the Orchard Audio amps to the Tonewinner, but it is more applicable when using RCA connections. When using XLR connections with the Orchard Audio amps, you do get an instant 6 dB gain, and that is to do with the input voltage. If you are considering purchasing these amps, I would do so with the expectations of using XLR connections. If you do want to purchase these amps and use RCA connections, that will work as well, but just expect to be a little bit more generous with the volume knob. When using RCA connections and the Starkrimson amps, 0 dB on the master volume on my AVR did get me a nice, quite loud volume, but not to the fatiguing levels that 0 dB would give me when using the Tonewinner amplifier. 0 dB is far too loud with the Tonewinner. But what the Orchard Audio amps lacked in gain using RCA connections, they made up for in audible sweetness. First of all, they are dead silent when plugged into the Klipsch speakers. Because the Klipsch are a more sensitive speaker or have a higher efficiency, I was used to getting some hiss when plugging into amplifiers like my Tonewinner or the Marantz MM7055 I had before that. Granted, the hiss was never audible from the main listening position. You have to put your ear up to the tweeter to hear it. But that was not the case with the Orchard Audio amps. It was dead quiet, even with my ear next to the tweeter. So the first thing I noticed was the highs were a little smoother than the already smooth AD5180. I think this shows the contrast between the two amps. In my opinion, for home theater use, you do want a little bit more pronounced highs for sound effects, whereas with music, which is the Starkrimson's forte, you want it to be a little smoother and to not overemphasize them. Bass was still good and punchy with both amps. Both the Tonewinner and the Starkrimson amps did a good job with bass. I would say that the Orchard Audio offering was a little bit more balanced and smooth overall, which again really shines for music listening. That isn't to say that the 5180 is not smooth and balanced. One of the strong suits of the 5180 when I reviewed it was that the highs were smoother compared to the AD7300 7-channel Tonewinner amplifier that I had. It's just that the Starkrimson does seem to be very well balanced and adds a little in the smoothness category while still remaining quite dynamic. After seeing how the Starkrimson amplifier sounded versus the Tonewinner 805180, I had another long listening session where I hooked up the Starkrimson amplifiers to the Orchard Audio DAC that I had in for review using XLR connections, and then I hooked up the DAC to my computer using a USB connection, and then I listened to music using Amazon Music HD. Hooking up the Starkrimson amplifiers to the Pecan Pie DAC with XLR connections instantly got me that extra dB boost that we talked about previously. And this truly is a match made in audio heaven. These two Orchard Audio products really do complement each other. In my review of the Orchard Audio Pecan Pie DAC, I wasn't shy on letting you guys know about the musical prowess of this magical box. It really does a fantastic job with music. The two units combined provide such a buttery smooth music experience. You quickly forget any flaws they may have while you are enveloped by musical nirvana. I found myself leaning back and just enjoying the music. To sum up the sound quality and performance of these amps, they sound good. They sound really good. I think especially for music. Do expect to be generous with the volume knob if you're using RCA connections, where using the XLRs do a much better job in the volume department. The difficult part for me as a reviewer is trying to get you guys to understand what I'm hearing in my room by using description. So when I'm describing buttery smooth, what I mean is that everything is playing at a nice level. Nothing is pronounced over the other thing. Every instrument, every strum, every vocal is just at a perfect level. It's just so smooth. Nothing seems to stand out as out of place. It's just all working together so well to provide you an outstanding musical performance. And that really does sum up the performance of these amplifiers, especially when paired with the Pecan Pie DAC. You are getting a musical performance. I don't think anybody out there that is a music fan that prefers their system for music or has a 2-channel setup would have any complaints about how these things sound. It is very hard to complain about the performance and the sound quality of these units. If there's anybody out there that can find a flaw in the musical prowess of these amplifiers, please do drop your comments down below, because I couldn't find any. They sound really, really good. You are actually getting a lot of performance in the music department for the price of these amps. And that brings us to my final thoughts. In the beginning of the video, I already told you guys that I do like these amplifiers, and that is very true. They have such a smooth, buttery musical experience. It's hard for me to even relay it to you guys. They are fantastic for music. But that doesn't mean that they are fantastic for everybody's situation or everybody's setup. So let's talk about that. I already alluded to the fact that these shine with music, and they really do. But I wouldn't really recommend them for home theater use. If you do purchase these amps and you have RCA connections, I feel like you're going to be underwhelmed by the volume that they put out. That being said, I don't think that Orchard Audio was targeting the home theater guys when they built these amplifiers. I think they are targeting the 2-channel enthusiast who wants a buttery smooth dynamic musical experience, and these amps do deliver that, especially when paired with the Pecan Pie DAC. Orchard Audio really is doing some fantastic things with their products, especially for the music enthusiast. So if that is you, this brand really should be on your radar. And if you are into audio and home theater, Spec of Tech should also be on your radar. So please consider subscribing. And if you do, you might as well tick the bell icon so you can be notified about all the awesome audio and home theater videos that I do upload. And please do take just 1 second to tick that like button down below. Make sure to be good to each other, enjoy your systems, and as always, stay techie.